Hello and welcome to the Shakedown. Our mission is to inform people about how the criminal justice system works, the real people impacted by the justice system, and methods to improve justice through compassionate and casual conversation. Hosts of the Shakedown share over 50 years of combined personal experience dealing with Texas prisons and working to change the criminal justice system. And now, here's our show. It is basically, a district attorney is basically measured on how hard can they punish someone. And even judges run on how many convictions do they get, how harsh they were on these type of offenders versus other type of offenders. And because that's the measurement that they have, there's not really another measurement for, we were able to, like, these victims were helped more in this county than other counties. Like, we can't, we don't have that metric of how much we help the victim.
That's I didn't know that. So you're saying that the judges and lawyers, maybe I had some idea with lawyers, they're measured, and their professional advancement is based on how harsh they are.
So, like, if you look at like campaign ads for judges or district attorneys, and these are not always elected roles. And but when you look at a campaign ads, their campaign ads are based on, like, I was just watching one for a judge today, and what her campaign ad explicitly says, there was a child, this man killed a child and she killed him right back. And so, like, they advertise that, and then they'll put other ones where this district attorney, reelect district attorney such and such because he was the harshest one on drunk drivers, and going on that, and they'll do it that way, and they can go and point to their record. And same way, even just within the district attorney's office, there's no, like, you can't, it's just like a good defense attorney, a defense attorney is good if they can get you your charges dropped or your charges lowered. That tells you how often they're able to do that. That tells you how good the defense attorney is, and then they charge more ultimately. And then, but if for a district attorney, their metric is going to be how often they prevent that from happening, because ultimately that's the only thing they're offering, because they're not offering anything else. Whereas if this was a restorative justice model, they would be offering anything. They could be offering, if the victim wanted to just, they wanted to pay for the funeral costs for, someone they killed, or they wanted to, or the hospital costs, or they wanted to actually, work closely with the victims, or make, honestly, I'm having trouble coming up with it, because the possibilities are endless, because it's really, it's individual. It's dependent on what the victims want. If they even want to, they don't even have to talk to the person who did it in a restorative situation. It's dependent on the individual case, and then it's also dependent on if the person, like you said, if they're remorseful or not, or even willing to work in that. If they're not admitting any guilt at all, then they can't even enter into it or make like a good, then really the only thing left is to go into court and fight it out to see if there is evidence that this person did it or not. And that's it. The other thing that district attorneys have, that a lot of people overlook, is that a lot of people think that the judge is in charge of the sentence, but really it's the district attorney, because 90 to 95% of cases don't ever even go to court, they get settled in pleas.
Mhm.
And the plea is determined by the district attorney and
Mhm.
signed by the defendant.
Mhm.
And a plea that the district attorney wrote that the defendant signed is not going to be argued by a judge.
Mhm.
And the judge has to finally agree with it, but they're never going to argue with it. And the reason that the district attorney can do that is because, so my case was I was facing 40 years.
Mhm.
And if I had gone up for, if I had tried to plea it out and had
Mhm.
said, I want to get a good plea,
Mhm.
this attorney could have said, all right, we'll give you 5 if
Mhm.
you say guilty and sign this paperwork, and then you make sure we don't have to do anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you like, and that's like or you can fight it and we're going to push for all 40
Right.
right there.
Right. Right.
And so that's, I mean, and a lot of people, they didn't even like, they know they didn't do it,
Mhm.
but that's a big risk. That's a huge gamble they're going to take.
For sure.
um, between 5 and 40. And like in my case, I have to serve half of that period.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I got the, I ended up having to do 10
Mhm.
with it going to court because they weren't going to offer me a plea
Mhm.
because I didn't know what I know now, which is if you just tell them you're guilty in the beginning, they're not going
Yeah.
to give you a plea.
Right. 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 Yep. I fought a traffic ticket and learned the same thing with, less consequences. But yeah, it actually pays not to fight that much unless you have an extremely strong case, especially if there's a jury. Yeah. Anyway.
you yeah, you just, I mean, you wait for a plea, but like you don't say, you have to say not guilty to start
Mhm.
with, and then
Mhm.
no matter what the situation is, and then
Mhm.
wait for them to come back. But yeah, that's kind of my point. Then point is that there's no there's no measuring stick for a
Mhm.
district attorney other than how harsh they are on certain sentences. In certain counties, they have different, the makeup of the county is different. Some of them care more about, like, they care more about fentanyl, they care more
Mhm.
about certain types of drugs, some of
Mhm.
them care more about drinking, some of them
Mhm.
care more about, I don't know, littering, or they care
Mhm.
more about, there's certain offenses that are like big deals in each county. And I'm not even
Right.
talking cities, just
Yep.
counties.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And it it's very dependent. So when they're either getting appointed or elected, or however they're going for the job, if they can really like hit that area hard
Mhm.
and show that they're doing really well on this um certain area on this certain
Mhm.
crime, then they will that will keep them moving forward. And especially,
Right. So
yeah,
yeah,
and
where
if they
there's
work
like
well with the police.
social political issues and agendas and all that sort of thing. I mean, to me, it speaks to some collective mental health issue around punitive approaches.
Hmm.
So again, uh, I don't want to come off like I'm not for consequences. I believe the best philosophy is personal accountability, and that can be really difficult a lot of the time. But I believe in justice too. So like there needs to be some level of this is a fair consequence. Um, this idea of just like hurt people more and like in your circumstance, like give him 40 years. How is that helping anything? You're not going to come out better. You're not going to come out resolved. You're not going to come out healed. The system can cause incredible trauma, and quite frankly, it does cause incredible trauma. Institutions can cause and do cause incredible trauma. I know a guy who murdered his bunkie when he was 19, and uh, ended up adding another 20 years to his sentence. And 42 years old, he was told that he would be released. I don't know how they came to that conclusion, but he was terrified of getting released. He started talking to me about it, and we were trying to prep for how he was going to be successful. And I started asking him about like Uber or something like that. Like, do you know how to take an Uber and whatever? And he goes, "Bro, I never been on the internet before." And he was really scared to get out because he felt so ill-equipped to function on the outside world. He had been in since I think he said he was like in juvie since he was 10 or 12 or something like that because he had a horrible upbringing and been in prison his entire life. He had no socialization, and I think his peers were so excited for him to get out, and it was such a great opportunity that he decided to go. But he was freaked, freaked the hell out to get out, and I think very ill equipped once he got out.
I uh, one of the co-hosts on this show he spent 30 years in prison, and he was in the same boat. He hadn't done anything. He had ended up using the internet from inside, but
Mm-hmm.
he it's tough. It's a tough, scary transition. Me, that's when you're locked up. You're the a lot of these a lot of these people, they have like careers in sex trafficking, in drug dealing, in armed robbery. Um, these are their careers because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have other skills. These are the skills they know. These are the ones they have.
Yeah.
Um, the skills you could get while you were locked up were GED
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a trade if you were lucky.
Right. Right.
And now that's about it. College may, if you were down for a really long time, you would get some college. And I will tell you, I took correspondence course because my family helped pay for it. And like, I watched the people who actually went to the college at the prison, the one prison in Texas that has college courses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
Mm-hmm.
um, they had to fight to get to class. It
Mm-hmm.
was like the guards did not let them go. They did not want them to go. It was a mess,
Mm-hmm.
and write they had to write up the guards and everything that didn't let them go,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'd have to worry about the guards retaliating later on, and they'd have to. It was an entire stressful mess just to
Mm-hmm.
try and get a degree. But like, yeah, there's nothing. They're not. Um, as far as like just offering skills to like go out and live with, they're not getting that, and
Well,
it really bothers me.
yeah, I mean, so one thing I'd say to anybody in the public that is maybe, learning something by our conversation here is that, this incentive and pressure that judges and prosecutors have on them to, reduce drunk driving accidents, reduce drug offenses, to reduce sex crimes, gang activity, whatever it may be, the result isn't to get more. The best result, in my opinion, is not to get more convictions. It's to treat offenders better so that they're restored back into the community and our communities become healthier.
Well, one thing that everyone forgets in the whole equation, eventually 99.9% of people who are locked up will get out.
Yeah,
They're coming back out.
right,
And if if on the majority of them, when they come out of prison, they are worse than when they went in.
right,
So that is the should be the biggest incentive of all.
right.
Is if they don't like, we need to help these guys. If we're gonna lock them up, we need to do something. Like, we need to be taking care of them while they're locked up.
I,
And that's on top of the fact that it's costly, it's expensive, it's
yep,
inhumane. It's
yep.
like there's a lot of things you could add on top of that, but it's
Mhm.
like, you this guy's coming back. He might come back to your neighborhood. Then what?
Right. Yeah, so repeat crime. I think I've read recidivism's in the 80 percentile.
Right.
So if one person goes to jail, they're 80 something percent likely to go back. Something's not right there. That's way too high. What are we doing about it?
Exactly. And there are things, there, there's lots of things um, that help them if you having connections to your family,
Mm-hmm.
having work, paying work outside of prison
Mm-hmm.
helps a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and being well educated. Those are three
Mm-hmm.
things, but they are, right now, one of the biggest things, like I said, having support, and which is not, having a conditional loan that they have to
Mm-hmm.
repay back.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's that. Um, but not having a conditional loan to pay back. It's a it's having something, actually having support, having mentors that can help them, um, grow,
Mm-hmm.
loving family support. And one of the biggest things that prisons have been doing all across the country, and shout out to Malone who loves it when I bring up this topic. Um, they're like making it more difficult to contact them they're in prison, limiting mail, limiting cards, limiting phone calls, limiting all of those things. Visitation, having dogs search people, all these kind of things. Like it is, uh, they are making it. We're It's actively being made harder than
Mm-hmm.
probably even when you were up at Canyon City.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, um, yeah, this is, there are things that we know that work. That's actually those three things: the social support, education, and employment are actually on the Department of Justice's website as things that are proven to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for those that don't have those things, there also needs to be something that like needs to be applied. There's something has to be done for those people as well, you know. And it's an unfortunate thing. I mean, I'm not super religious, but there is a biblical saying that has always stuck with me, which I think Jesus said something like, "The poor will always be with us," and you know whether you're Christian or not, that doesn't matter. Like the wisdom that's trying to be conveyed is the poor are always going to be with us. Like I don't think there is some utopia where people are going to come out, where we're going to have civilization mastered to the degree where there's no trauma and there's no hardship and there's economic balance all the time. I don't think that can happen. I would love to see that, but I don't think we're close. And so there's going to be disadvantaged people no matter what, and we need to keep working with them, and we need to keep trying to rehabilitate them until we get this right. I mean, 100 years ago, uh, famine was a really big issue, and like widespread disease was a really big issue. And now, not so much. You know, now even like the poorest people can get free clothes and a meal at the shelter. That's a big improvement in humanity. I hope we have more to go. And in the meantime, you know, we need to deal with disadvantaged people, people who aren't educated, people who can't get a job, can't hold a job, people who have serious, severe mental health issues. We still need to try to work with them.
That's absolutely. Did On that, were there any problems that you found were especially prevalent, amongst the people you were working with?
I mean, we were really trying to change prison culture. So prison culture, I'm sure, as you have some experience with, um, it's it sucks. There's like you're saying, transactional relationships or no relationships, a lot of posturing, a lot of fear. Um, the food's terrible. I don't know what's to be done about the food, but but we were really trying to like aim at reducing conflict. So if I can use my words to speak with you instead of my fists, win, right? Safer for inmates, safer for correctional officers. If we can learn better communication skills, if we can slow down, if we can try to find some empathy, if we can apply some certain things, it's probably going to be a better environment. So We were really aimed at reducing physical violence.
Yeah, I mean, is so yeah, and I can see that with the way that you were talking about with the active listening, the discussing it, actually just getting people to listen to one another as opposed to reacting and acting
Hmm.
acting out when that happens.
Just realizing there's another way, and like I was just saying a few minutes ago, most guys that we worked with and ladies that we worked with, they don't have any education. They grew up in really ignorant communities, ignorant families, um, toxic situations, right? Like gang culture. Most people that get attracted to gangs, in my experience from what I've heard, is horrible mom and dad blood family origin, so need some connection, need some group. Gang is willing to give some love, even if it's intertwined with violence and drugs. So now I have my gang. So I have my replacement family.
Right,
Gang members generally don't have a great family and a loving mother and father, right?
right,
It's usually quite the opposite that they get attracted to a gang. So situations like that, like they've just never been taught, like empathy, communication, psychological skills, communication skills, and so exposing that population just some really basic stuff, I think makes a difference.
that's one, and I noticed that too. I learned when I once I learned how gangs actually work, how
Hmm.
there's the initiation process, which is
Hmm.
incredibly violent and everything, and
Right.
also the gang's love is conditional. It is,
Hmm.
you have love, you have support, you have protection. It's very conditional on
Right.
whether you are supporting the gang and whether how they're what is their opinion of you.
Hmm.
It's not family, and none of them have maybe even had a relationship where they've had unconditional love and support from someone. And the idea of it, so I've seen guys who've like come into contact with the concept
Hmm.
and they either immediately blow it off and they're like, that's that's not even possible, or
Yep.
they just break down when they see it and they're
Right.
like, and they have like a religious experience
You're right. Right.
seeing
Right.
it.
Right. Yep.
But so in your before we before we wrap up, I'd like to
Mhm.
know, what do you think could be improved, or any other final thoughts you'd have like to add before we
with,
wrap up.
with the justice system, with
Yes,
incarcerated populations.
or with therapy in there as well.
I mean, I'd love to see more programs from the outside coming in trying to make an impact. I'd love to see more funding for those kinds of programs from the public. I think one thing that is encouraging is, and I've heard police officers talk about this, I've heard correctional officers talk about this at multiple facilities, is that as much as it might be annoying to that population of correctional officers, the consequences of the George Floyd situation um, really changed a lot of things inside the institutions. There are cameras on every corners. There's body cams on every correctional officer. So there's no more he said, she said. There's no more power abuse. There's so much more accountability, and there's actually really tight, I think, well formulated um, justifications for applications of violence. So like if you start yelling at me and I'm a cop and you're being aggressive but you're just yelling at me, I can't shoot you. If you're running at me with a knife, maybe it's justified that I shoot you. But if you're just yelling at me, I'm not allowed to say, "Hey, I'm scared, so I shot him and killed him."
Right.
It needs to be appropriate escalations of control. And that sort of thing of like appropriate meeting of the injustice is starting to spread like wildfire throughout the system. And I think it's really encouraging for changing some of the culture. I had to do a defense tactic class, and I was talking with a guy who had been in the correctional field for 30 years. And he was talking about what I'm talking about now with the changes that are happening with correctional officers. And he was saying 20 years ago, the culture was if you're person that you're trying to control, your inmate, your prisoner, was talking out of order, you smack them over the head with a club and tell them to shut the F up. Okay. That doesn't fly anymore. They're instructed to do a completely different thing because the public is paying attention. And I think that sort of change in the system is a really good thing, and I think it will continue to be so. And I think the system has a lot of chance of improving because there's a lot more eyes on it.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
that is big hope. And I think that's honestly the biggest lesson is daylight is the best medicine. It helps bringing attention to it, having people see it, and that's also why we have podcasts, so we can talk about it more, get more people to see it. And speaking of which, how can they find you? What are you doing now? What are you up to now?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a private practice right now. I'll be offering a lot more in-person programs, a lot like what I was offering in the prisons next year. But if you're an individual that's looking for counseling, my website is betterrelationships.work. I also work with couples, really specialize in couples work and trying to resolve conflicts. If there's infidelity, long-term connection issues, really good at kind of like helping reestablish love and trust for couples. Yeah, and then of course, I've done general mental health for 15 years now. So any real clinical issues, just really trying to find yourself, trying to find meaning, trying to improve your life with anxiety or depression or whatever. I do free consultations. You can look me up, Max Brandel. Just Google me and see if we're a good fit.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's been a pleasure.
You can find Shakedown merch, graphic novels, and other projects at waywordpress.com. That's WAYWORD press.com. If you would like to support the Shakedown, get exclusive content, and watch episodes live, you can support us at patreon.com/The Shakedown. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment to give Malone that inner peace he so richly deserves.